You should be skeptical of anything and everything that you hear. Because what happens is now, some of the people that are like totally against mainstream media go fucking polarize the other way. And listen, I recognize that lots of what is now truths started off as conspiracy theorists, as theories, right? And so I think we should explore them. But if you go too far the other way, then people are like totally against mainstream media, but then they're over here talking about some other shit that's just as like lacking in trustworthiness as the mainstream media. So I think that we should be skeptical and untrusting of all media that we consume nowadays. I think that's really important. There is an information overload. And so you should always be skeptical. You should be skeptical of the influencer. You should be skeptical of things that I say. You should be skeptical of mainstream media. You should be skeptical of your favorite podcast, right? Or your second favorite one, because this is now your favorite one. Right? You should always be skeptical. And skeptical, right? Skeptical, people often say, oh, I'm skeptical of that, when they're actually just shutting it down. They say I'm skeptical. What they mean is I don't want to do it. I'm shutting it off. That's not skeptical. Skeptical is, I'm skeptical. I don't know if this is true or not, so I'm going to try it. I'm going to investigate it. I'm going to be curious about it. And then I'm going to have an honest reflection at the end of it on whether I think it's true or not. I think we should do that with all media that we consume nowadays. Rather than just making one the devil, one, look, I would argue that probably mainstream media is the worst because it's a big, hyper-capitalist corporate machine. And so when you look at like the way that power operates, power needs influence. And so the biggest influence, and this is changing and why they're panicking, but the biggest influence up until this point has always been the way that we consume news. But if you go back like to the 90s, like before the internet, right? We had the news every night. You'd read the newspaper in the morning, and then you might have the news in the evening, and then that was it till the next day. And the job of the news was to keep us up to date with the information that was going on in the world. Now, I don't know if it's always been like this, or maybe I'm being slightly nostalgic, but I feel like back in the 90s, there was a sense, I mean, it was probably still wrapped up in propaganda then, right? But there was a sense back then, at least, that's what news did, right? It did. It just kept you updated. And the BBC was always supposed to be impartial. But you can't, like, nothing can be impartial because of humans, right? So whoever's running it, they will impart some of their shit onto it. So it's never been that impartial. But what I would argue is that when the internet came out, influence changed. And I do think that those in power for positions, so I'm talking big corporate companies, big pharma and stuff like that, they began to realize that how we consume the news influences our belief systems, right? So, and I think people have woken up to that a little bit, that just because it's on Sky News, it doesn't mean that it's not been fabricated or altered or manipulated or changed in some way, or had at least some influence on it to influence the way that we think. Of course, I think this is changing now in the era of podcasts and information. Now people can go and consume different information, but that different information is still always going to have influence, right? No information is impartial. I'm not impartial, right? We can all be as impartial as we can, but I'm fucking influenced by the 37 years that I live on this life, right? So how I view a situation is different to how somebody else is going to view a situation. And to pretend that we can reach this place where we're completely impartial, it's almost impossible. I'm going to always impart some of my experience on stuff. So I think that skepticism is important. And it's okay to disagree with people that you really like. I think that's important as well, you know, because we all have like our hero teachers. So if I look at like the most obvious one for me is Gabor Mate, right? It's been my hero for years and years now, my greatest teacher. I don't agree with everything that he says though. But in the beginning, you get a bit like that, don't you? You put these people on a pedestal and you believe everything that they say. But that's like how sort of the madness of crowds begins. That's how groupthink begins, right? So it's really important to always think, do I believe that? Let me break that down. And then allow yourself to change your mind.